So yeah, this is Nerdly Out Loud again, doing another little chat, but this time we're going a little bit different. It's not filmmakers this time. I mean, you've worked in TV and film and everything like that, but this time we're talking about a board game, a tabletop game, because we've got this at a horror convention. Tell us a little bit about Parable Games and the game that you've got with you. First of all, introduce yourself.
Hello, so I'm Charlie Menzies. So I'm the lead creative at Parable Games, and our main product that we kind of here with today is SHIVER. So it's a horror tabletop role-playing game. So in the kind of likes of D&D, Call of Cthulhu, that kind of game. But what SHIVER allows you to do is play any horror movie, book, TV show, bit of pop culture. As long as there's something spooky, scary or weird going on, you can bring that to life on the tabletop. So you can play anything from Stranger Things to Scooby-Doo to Friday the 13th to Alien. The horror world is your oyster with it as a system, basically.
So how did you get into all this? Because obviously I mentioned there you've done a bit of film and TV and everything, then you've moved into sort of tabletop gaming. How did you really just sort of get into that industry and why? Because it must be really, really complicated to make.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird story. So I trained up in York doing film and TV production, and kind of after graduating I was kind of freelancing, and then eventually got a job in a post-production house in London. And I'd been playing kind of RPG games. I got introduced to them when I was at university, and we would kind of play a lot amongst friends and kind of mostly D&D and kind of play around with them. When I left university, one of my biggest specialisms was screenwriting and writing in general, and I entered a writing competition through Penguin Random Publishing House, and I won, and it gave me an Amazon voucher, and I was like, you know what I want to do? I don't own the D&D books because they're really expensive. It's like, I'm going to get all of them, reach out to all my friends online, because we all got scattered, for various jobs across the UK, and use this as a way to kind of keep my writer friends, my filmmaking friends, like a good way for us to touch base and stay in touch and kind of do something fun. So we started playing D&D. We were having a really good time, but some of my players started to struggle with the system, like with it being heavily numerical. Some of my players were dyslexic and dysnumerate, and ultimately I found myself trying to replicate movies, in particular horror movies, on the tabletop with D&D, but it just didn't feel quite right. So I started tinkering away in my spare time, and I kind of homebrewed a system, one that I thought would be a bit easier to kind of played it amongst our friends and had a really good time with it, and I thought it was going to end there. But smash cut to kind of like a Christmas late after about half a year of playing this homebrew game, and I had my notebook with me, and I was at like our family Christmas dinner with my brother Barney. So he runs a friendly local gaming store up in the Nottinghamshire area called Seventh City Collectibles, and he was asking me about it, and I showed him my notebook, and he sat down, we both having a whiskey, and he was just thumbing through kind of doing that, and he finished reading it, and then he kind of turned to me and he says, when do you want to make it? And I was like, what do you mean? This is just like a goofy thing I've been doing with my mates so we can play horror movies that we loved. And he was like, no, people really want to see this. I think they'd really want to play it. I've not seen this in my store before. I was like, okay. So we started developing it, and then launched our Kickstarter campaign for the core rulebook in, I think just at the kind of roughly the start of lockdown, or kind of when we're in the pandemic. And it was a big success, got it funded, and now we're kind of rolling out physical products, and I'm working on it full time. So it's been a bit of a saga, I would say. Yeah,
it's pretty amazing that you would take a concept that you were playing with friends, like you say, a homebrew kind of thing, where you kind of just like, let's have some fun with this and see what happens, to now having a full-fledged game, loads of different books for it, loads of different styles of play, and it's like a full-time job now. That's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
I think it's my mentality with it is I had the same approach to, I still do screenwriting, but just not as much now. But anything that I want to see on screen, or in this case, I apply that to games as well. So it's like, I want to make the games that I want to play, or I think that other people would want to play, that I'm excited and jazzed to think. And I think it's just a general thing for kind of any form of creativity, is you want to put out something into the world that you want to be there, that you would want to engage with yourself, and kind of hopefully people follow suit and want to kind of watch something, play something that you've made too. So yeah.
So when it comes down to crafting the stories, because obviously you're saying like you can play like Stranger Things, you can play like Ghostbusters. Do you follow the narrative of sort of like the movies or the TV shows that's out there, or are you creating your own narrative with those types of characters?
So for me, in terms of the Shiver stories that I write, I tend to do a lot of like homage nudges and winks to other stories, but they're kind of original stories of their own kind of making, but are paying homage and kind of giving people the elements and the story kind of like big horror movie moments that they all want to play in those stories. So like, for example, the first story I ever wrote for Shiver was one called The Lost Ship, which is about a kind of military research vessel has disappeared in the Arctic and a team's going out to go and find what's going on. So it's kind of got a classic kind of like almost like dog soldiers setup with the consequences of the thing is kind of thing. So it's I love just smashing things together that I love and trying to put a new spin on it, say something different and play around with it. But one of the things that I say to new players, especially people who are running the game, is that it's totally fine to just grab a movie and say, right, today we're going to play Stranger Things, today we're going to play Ghostbusters, today we're going to play The Conjuring, because it means it gives you the beats, it gives you like kind of what the enemies are and kind of what the threat is, and it also, for new players who haven't role played before, rather than having to generate a brand new character, you can play, like the mother of the family where the kids are getting possessed. You can play the Exorcist. You can play those characters that you've seen on screen as a quick reference point, which makes stepping into role playing so much easier and much less daunting, because you're doing an impression of a character that already exists in a way.
You've kind of created the perfect gateway drug. Is what you're saying. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I love tabletop role playing, and I think there's always that hurdle of getting people in. So we've described ourselves as a bit of a gateway RPG, because
that's the thing. Like when you talk to people about playing tabletop gaming, like a lot of my friends are like normal, so to speak, and it's sort of like, do you want to have a little crack at doing that? And it's like, oh no, it's too faffy. But I like the fact that you've sort of taken the numerical aspect out of it, because even that for me sometimes is like, it's a bit much. So how does that work in terms of like you're taking that way? How does it work in terms of like your powers and your abilities and stuff?
So the dice system that we've designed for it is completely unique. So it's the archetype dice system. So the way that it works, it's a dice pool system, and we have D6s and D8s. So your D6s are your what we call a skill die. Right. Each face has a symbol on it that represents a different skill area. So there's like a fist that represents grit, which is like your physical strength and fortitude and how much like damage you can kind of resist. Then you have things like luck for how lucky you are, strange for using magical powers, levitating a chair and giving yourself a nosebleed, that kind of stuff, or turning into a werewolf. Then you've got smarts for like investigation and like deductive thought, hearts for both sides of the coin of charisma, for like lying and cheating or charming and schmoozing. You can kind of do both.
Love that.
And wit for dexterity of like body and mind, so reacting quickly to things, picking locks, that kind of thing. So like some skills that are very common in other RPGs, but luck and other bits like being a bit more tailored to horror movies and Shiver. But the idea is that there's those 6 broad skill areas, and the better you are at something, the more dice you roll. And so say classic check, you want to kick down a door, for example. So as the director, which is our version of a games master who'd be running the game, I'd say, okay, you want to kick down a door, that's an act of physical force, I want you to make a grit check. You'd see how many dice you have in your pool for grit. So say I'm a big beefy boy, I'm a warrior archetype, I get a load of dice, I'm the jock in the slasher movie, now I'm picking up a fistful of dice, I'm rolling, and rather than looking for a numerical value, I'm looking for symbols. And so they're all color-coded as well, so I'm looking for fists that are orange. And as soon as you kind of see that on the table, it evokes almost an instant response compared to, I've rolled a 14, what does a 14 mean? It's the problem that we run into with a lot of other RPGs. With this, it's like you see a sea of orange, you're like, I've kicked that door off its hinges, haven't I? Or you see like a sea of purple, which is, and are kind of little strange symbols, it's like, oh, something bad's happened. Like, you've kicked the door, made a load of noise, and like the monster is kind of, you've made enough noise to draw the monster to you, for example. Or there's various other ways that it can go, because it's not a binary success or fail. So if you rolled a load of smarts, for example, I could say you kick the door, you stub your toe and you take 1 damage, but you notice somebody's hidden a key under the mat, or there's a keypad that you can hack. The dice have consequence in terms of that. Having symbols over numbers provides prompts that allow you to move the story forwards. So yeah, it just makes it very kind of instant, simple, and easy for people to get in. So if numbers are something that scares you, or just makes you a little bit kind of, oh, this seems a bit too crunchy for me, that's the reason behind it. So it's something that, as I say, every role evokes something. Like, kind of, for me, numbers don't really evoke anything, but if I see symbols that have meaning and colour, I can instantly have a feeling of how I've done, how well I've done, or potentially where I can take the story for both me running the game and also for the player, because it provides nice points of improvisation from both sides of the table. So yeah.
It does seem like far more accessible than your average Dungeons and Dragons, which is kind of like when I saw you setting up and everything. Like, I'm a big film fan, I'm a big horror film fan, and I do like the D&D kind of style gaming and tabletop gaming and that, but your game just looked so easy to just pick up and just have a game and sort of play, and something I could take home to my kids and say, let's have a go at this.
Absolutely. I mean, we've
maybe not the horror. Like.
The thing is, I talk about that in some of the adventures of, like, kind of, how do you modulate horror to kind of like tone it down for kids? And it's like, basically, like, focus on your peril rather than the terror. It's kind of, there's a very big difference between Jason Voorhees slashing through people with a machete to, like, the Velociraptors in Jurassic Park, which are scary, but they're relatively bloodless. There's certain ways that you can, and it's something that me and another one of our staff writers, Adam, our background obviously being in screenwriting, we know how to write things for to comply with being a 12A or a 15 or an 18. We know what the rules are, so we've basically applied the film classification boards to games in order to kind of gear certain stories towards certain audiences.
Probably a little bit of a tricky question, but have you ever had anything like that where somebody's come back to you and said something about the game, or as you've been creating it, that it's sort of like you maybe need to change that a little bit, and it's like sort of killing your darlings kind of thing?
Ooh, in terms of, like, when we were developing, I mean, absolutely. Like, so we rigorously tested things, and actually one of the things, it was less of like a killing something. So there were various iterations of, like, how the health system worked and things that like I killed and rebuilt from scratch, like, quite a few times to get it to a point that people felt human and felt squishy and felt mortal, which was quite a difficult balancing thing. But one of the interesting things that we had that we added very late in the game's development of we were running combat, and it was the kind of thing of, like, it was moving quickly, it was at the pace that we wanted, it wasn't kind of feeling like a slog like sometimes D&D combat can feel like. So I just feel like I'm crapping on D&D a little bit. But yeah, they've been bad in the news recently. I can do it. But one of the things that we found is that the monsters just didn't feel scary enough, and we were trying to figure out what was the key to this. Like, what could we do that was different? And something that, what haven't we seen elsewhere? And then we realised the thing is like, when you go and like stab a slasher, it's scary for characters because you never know how the creature is going to react or what's going to happen when you do that. It might succeed, it might fail, but you don't know what the killer's going to do. So what we introduced and we created was a reaction system. So if you hit any monster in Shiver, they have a different state of, like, reactivity, as we've called it. So they have a react table. So when you hit it, if a creature is quite reactive, basically the director rolls a single die, and there's a chance that nothing might happen. Or if you stab Jason Voorhees, he might reach out, grab your head, and crush it.
Nice.
So and it's gives a real, and as soon as we put that in, because it was kind of from players saying, like, no, I like the combat, but it doesn't feel like horror enough. We added that in, and instantly everyone's terrified of enemies, because it's like they're hitting stuff and then it just does something different, and they'll be like, okay, it's going to do that again, right? And then they hit it and it does something completely different, or they hit it and it does nothing, and then, like, why isn't it doing nothing? Is it planning something? What's going on? And it just instantly added that element of the unknown that combat needed. So yeah, so it's that kind of thing. There were elements that definitely we kind of killed off, but one of the biggest thing we found was feedback was what was missing that needed to be put in, and that, I think, the reaction system is one of the things I'm most proud of for that.
It's great that you were able to take that as well, and because I know a lot of people, like creators and such things, are very, very precious about their work. So it's great that you took that feedback and you've created something even better. And you're right, because you get that in movies. Do you get that oh crap moment, like when somebody like stabs someone or somebody hits someone, and then all of a sudden they just turn around and say, I shouldn't have done that. So I do like that. I like that a lot. I heard, I was talking to, it's Adam, isn't it, out there with you today. He was telling me that you've got streamers playing this game and running this game. How cool is that?
Crazy. Like, it's actually wild. Like, I got quite emotional, I think, the first time I saw kind of independent like streamers just playing the game. Like, it was like people who are in our kind of Discord server just being like, we've got a regular game that's running. One of them was someone who independently made their own podcast series that we listened to.
Of Shiver.
Of Shiver. Yeah. No, like really early on when we released the core system, someone made a podcast called The Doom Clock. And started playing
right now, because you've got like We Meet in a Tavern, you've got the guy that does Rick and Morty, Dan Harmon, not Rick and Morty, is it?
Yeah, so he's one of the half of that two Rick and Morty, but to Community as well.
And so like they're all kind of like doing their little. Would you do a full professional podcast like that and sort of like run your own sort of like ongoing story with Shiver? Would you do that?
Absolutely. Whether it would be us or not, I'm unsure, just because I have a very little time. Because we've done like so in terms of podcasts, I've done one podcast episode where we did a one shot, which actually funny enough starred Adam as well. That's on our YouTube that you can listen to. It's on Spotify and all the regular places as well. And we wanted to record more, but then book production, everything just exploded, and I haven't managed to get back to it. But
it's a good problem.
I can't speak too much about it, but I will say on the podcast front, there are big things in the works that are on the way.
Nice.
So that's all I will say. But yes.
Have you ever had? This is a tricky question as well. I don't know how to word it. Give me 2 seconds. Your books out there are absolutely incredible. Like the layout, the artwork, everything about your books. Just the way you bind your covers, and you've got the glossy like the foil cover on the front of one of them and all that. They look fantastic. Has anybody ever came up to you that has a game that maybe doesn't look as good, maybe doesn't feel as good, and try and apply what you're doing, or take certain elements and sort of like, or even try and grab you to make their game?
We've had some talks with some people about smaller games who like want advice. I've quite a few people who've asked me about printing, definitely. So like for the printing, is artist Ben Alexander is amazing. So he does pretty much all the illustrations. In Gothic, we have Chris as well, who does a lot of our like scenes and landscapes. For the layout, that's actually me. I taught myself InDesign. Nice. in order to do it. So no, thank you for that lovely compliment. But yeah, no. So it's sometimes that, but there are other people, who are looking at that. So there are people who we've been talking to about like trying to help out, potentially publish under us in the future, maybe, like if that's something we want to do. So yeah, but I say that the thing is that there's a hell of a lot of great RPG stuff out there, and I know that we've kind of like gone down the very like AAA, like trying to kind of mimic kind of the big competitors in terms of how we bind and make our books. But honestly, like if people are like wanting to get into RPGs or design, like doing horror stuff, honestly, like take a look at zine production, take a look at like making those smaller booklets, because there is, even though they are not of the kind of expense scale of like doing like foiling and all the fancy stuff that we've been doing, there is a lovely handcrafted quality. And like some of the stuff that people have come and shown me their stuff, or stuff that I buy when I'm at cons, is this really nice boutique handcrafted kind of little zines that are filled with great ideas. And it's the thing of that, like polish and production can be really, really important. But I think this is the same for films as well. It's like, you know, you can make something on a tiny budget, but like if it's got a lot of heart, if it's filled with great ideas, and the story's good, or in the case like with RPGs, the stories that you can generate are engaging and fun for people to play, it doesn't matter. So I'd encourage anyone who's interested, like honestly, come and talk to us. I love talking to people about like kind of making their ideas a reality. So yeah.
So you're doing a lot of different festivals, a lot of different cons and everything like that. Let people know where they can kind of see you coming up. If you've got any more festivals you're going to be hitting, where they can catch Parable, where they can find Shiver. Just pimp it for a minute and just let people know about the game.
Okay. In terms of kind of conventions that are coming up that we're doing, we're going to be at London Comic Con Spring in the London Olympia, so that'll be next week. We're in Aircon up in Harrogate as well.
My neck of the woods?
Yeah, and it's from there, like, my memory's starting to fade. We have a very long spreadsheet with all these on. But if you keep an eye on our social media, we post whenever we're going to conventions and things like that. So you can find us on Facebook at Shiver RPG, on Instagram at Shiver RPG, on Twitter it's at Games Parable, which is a bit of a funky one because Parable Games apparently was already taken by somebody else. Damn, whoever that was. In terms of our websites, you can learn more about Shiver specifically at shiverrpg.com, where we have character sheets for you to download, our free dice roller, where you can roll the dice online and give it a try. And if you're interested in buying the game, you can go to www.parablegames.co.uk, and we have everything available that's out currently in PDF and also kind of physical format that delivers anywhere kind of in the UK. So yeah,
please check all those awesome things out and do all that. One more thing, what's the long-term goal with Shiver? What's like the long-term, and I know you've kind of got it to where it is now, but what do you want to do? Where do you see it going?
So for me, the way that I'm tackling it is where Shiver came from is this desire to be able to sit down and play any horror movie on the tabletop. And at the minute, I think the core rule system does that. But what I want to do is keep providing support, new ideas, new pieces, and kind of new mechanics that allow people to explore the rich subgenres that horror has. Horror as a genre in cinema and just in terms of fiction in general has the richest vein of subgenres, I think, in any genre.
Yeah, you're right.
And for me, being able to produce books that facilitate that for people, for me the aim is to have enough expansions and have enough kind of ideas and elements there for anyone who wants to run a game. If they have any idea, any horror idea, there's something within the core rulebook or an expansion that can help that come to life. Because ultimately, Shiver for me is about obviously I love kind of like people playing the game, but the thing that makes me really proud of it as a product is basically giving people a platform to tell their own horror stories, to tell their stories that potentially they couldn't get made. I mean, me and Adam were talking about this outside of that. Actually, we realised with Shiver, half of the stories that are in there are scripts or short stories that we've kind of haven't really found a place for, or were too expensive to make. I mean, when we were coming out of uni, like both of our final year screenplays were like high concept like horror pieces that were like we would love to see get made, but we didn't have the connections and money to do it.
Perfect place to be is a place like this.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And now people play on the tabletop, which is just as fun. Yeah,
I love that. I love that. Like I said to you before we started recording, I wasn't sure how that was going to go at a horror festival when everybody was setting up. I love the vibe of the way your game feels, but it's been packed. The tables have been packed. It's been absolutely fantastic to see. I've loved all that. Before I let you go, what's been your absolute favourite death that you've created while playing this game?
Oh, right. So this one might be a little bit of a spoiler for this protocol story in the Cursed Library. So I'm saying this now, so if people don't want spoilers, hush your ears. But so one of my favourite ones is I had a player, my friend Scott. He needed to leave the game before it had finished. For some reason, and he was playing what we call it's a cockroach survivor archetype. So it's your Benny from the Mummy, basically, who's very much out for their own. So the protocol story is it's a sci-fi story where a bunch of space truckers have gone down onto an alien planet because there's an SOS call. I'm sure it sounds familiar.
No.
But there is an element of like certain corporations on these shared spaceships that have their own motives, and my friend Scott was very much playing up to these motives for his own gain and was setting up to betray the rest of the group. However, he was unaware that within the story, on the director's side, there is a priest who is on the ship who is actually a company android. Secretly, is very kind of like demure and nice, and it says and seems like they're all okay. And at the point where basically it seemed that this character that Scott was playing was going to try and betray the company as well, the android revealed itself and basically kicked into the protocol, snapped his neck, and threw him down a trash chute.
There we go.
But the reason I loved it so much is that I never obscure these things from other players, because my general rule is just being like, it's like watching a movie. Like, you have your character and you have you playing the game, and you can separate the two.
Mm-hmm.
So we had this lovely moment of, I played out this scene in front of everybody, and then the priest adjusts their collar, goes back into the other room, as being like, oh, has anybody seen Scott? I don't know where he's gone. And it goes back to being the lovely, friendly priest again. And they're all like, oh no, we don't know where he is. And you can just see all the players sweating, because they just know that this is an android and is deadly, but they know their characters don't know it. And it is just, and it gives that lovely dramatic irony that you get when you're watching a film, but you get to play through it as well. So yeah, that's probably my favourite death.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
this has been fantastic. Thank you for coming to the convention and the festival, and having a table there and giving us your game here and showing people how to play it and everything like that. It's been great to see.
Thank you. It's my absolute pleasure.
And thanks for doing this. And all the best for everything. And I will be picking something up before I leave, because the wife's been told just give me the credit card.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a hoot.